So Hungarian is a difficult language. It is hard to learn, especially for English speakers, but it is so beautiful. The first time I heard it in the MTC was when we had just walked into the classroom and our teacher just started speaking Hungarian to us immediately, and I was just like, whoa. It was like he tried to be nice and like slow down, tried to teach us how to introduce ourselves and stuff like that, but he was just speaking Hungarian to us. And then later on in the day, there was a group of missionaries that was also going to Hungary that was just ahead of us by about 6 weeks. And so we would usually pray together before going to lunch or before going back to our apartments at night. So our first experience with having them come pray with us, one of the sisters, she obviously prayed in Hungarian, and it just sounded so fluttery. It was just all these K's and T's and just all this stuff all over the place. And I thought it was just so beautiful. And so obviously it sounded different once I got to the country, because we were all English speakers trying to speak Hungarian. But then you get there and the native speakers, it's just so beautiful. So beautiful. Their poetry is so beautiful when you know the language and you can actually break down what they're saying in their poetry. It's just so, it's just lovely. I don't know how to describe it, because the way that they conjugate their words, the way that they're able to express themselves, it makes it so much easier for them to put these thoughts down, like just to mesh it together. It's hard to explain. So like I've said a few times, yes, they do conjugate things. They don't have the gender roles. They don't have the like boy and girl verbs or nouns and stuff like that. And if they're talking about a he or a she, it's the same word. It's just like that person, that individual. So sometimes you have to make sure you're talking about the right person, because you don't have that gender thrown in there unless they say their name or say their relation, like, oh, my daughter or something. But yeah, there's conjugations for possession, like how you possess things. I don't know. It's all over the place. It's hard. I'm still learning it. I'm still mastering it. Even after speaking it for 19 months, it's like I'm still working on it. But I don't know. I guess any advice that I would give to people that are learning the language and that end up going to Hungary is to not be afraid to ask questions. I got to a point where I did feel a bit down on myself in the MTC, because my companion, that was the one that was going to Hungary with me, she was doing so well with the language. She does have Hungarian roots in her, and so her father is Hungarian, but he didn't really speak Hungarian with her in the home. But I just feel like, first, she was just smart, plus I just feel like it was in her blood. She was just so good at learning the language, and so I felt kind of bad that I wasn't on the same page as her sometimes, and unfortunately it kind of caused me to not want to try sometimes around her, because I was just like, oh, she speaks so well, like I'll let her do it, like when we did our practice teaching. And I also would feel sometimes embarrassed to ask questions, be like, oh, well, what did that word mean? But that was a bad habit to get in. When I got to the country and would try speaking with people, sometimes I just didn't want to ask questions. I didn't want to look dumb, or I didn't want to ruin the flow of conversation if two people were talking and then I couldn't understand, so I would just let them talk and pretend I understood and just nod my head and smile, But then that got me into trouble once, and I learned my lesson, because I was in church and it was my first day in a new city. It was in Szeged. Well, I'd only been it's kind of complicated. I'll give a little history of my mission. So I got to Budapest, I was assigned my trainer. And then we went to Miskolc, my first area, but then my trainer got sick, and so I was only with her for a couple of weeks. And finally we established a plan with the mission president that we would go to Budapest, go to the mission home in Buda, and she was going to take some time there to recover. And so then I was assigned to the Buda sisters to serve with them. And I was with them for a week. And then the mission president reassigned me to go down to Szeged, to another city, to serve with 2 other sisters. And so I was put again with the sister that I had gone to Hungary with, because she was still doing her training. And then I was with her trainer. And so the 3 of us served together in Szeged it was about 3 weeks that I was there with them. So my first transfer I spent in 3 different cities. And so by the time I got to Szeged, I had been in the country for 3 weeks. About 3 to 4 weeks. So I was still learning. And anyway, so my first Sunday there, I got to Sunday school. Sacrament meeting was awesome. And then we got to Sunday school, and there was this man there, and I think he was an investigator. And he kind of started talking with me, and I was trying to talk to him, and he was asking how long I had been in the country and where I was from and how I liked being there. And so when he asked where I was from, I told him, oh, I'm from Utah. And he just started going off about the Indians. Indianok. So I understood that. I was like, oh, Indians, Indianok. Okay, that's a similar word. I can do this, you know. That was close. So I felt like I was following the conversation pretty well, and he was just using his hands a lot, like talking about the Indians. And I got lost. I admit, I was like, okay, I don't know what we're talking about anymore, but I assumed Indians. And he started doing something like this on his forehead with his hands, just saying something. And in my mind, I'm thinking, headbands. He's talking about the headbands, how the Indians had such nice headdress, you know. And so I just tell him like, oh, as safe, as nagyon safe. I tell him that's very beautiful. Like, they have beautiful things, you know. Come to find out, my trainer tells me like, no, he's talking about scalping, how the Indians would scalp, you know. And I was like, oh, I felt so dumb. I felt so bad because I'm telling him that's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And he's like, scalping, you know. It's like, that's the most not beautiful thing. I don't know. And all the young adults that were in the room, they just started laughing, and everybody just, they thought it was hilarious. And I laughed too. I was like, okay, that was dumb. But then I just came to find, like, you know, like, you can only go so far assuming that you know what someone's talking about, but it is so much better to just ask. To just be like, what is that? What does that word mean? And plus, you'll learn the language a lot faster if you're not afraid to ask questions. And so it took some time for me to get over that, to feel more comfortable asking and stopping conversations. That way I could catch up. And now looking back, it's like after I was able to make that change, to change my mindset with it, then I just started to do so much better with the language. I wasn't afraid anymore. And sometimes I would still fall in those situations where I would just pretend I understood, and I'd be like, yeah, totally, but didn't understand. So my advice would be, don't do that. Just ask questions. You'll learn a lot faster. You'll avoid embarrassing situations most of the time. but yeah, it's hard, but it's beautiful. It's fun to speak. So